How's it going, everybody? It's Yeong here with a Final Fantasy XV news update. The following information comes from an interview conducted by Japanese news outlet Famitsu, whose information was later translated by website Siliconera. The interview was with none other than Final Fantasy XV's director Hajime Tabata. During the interview, one topic that was discussed was the structure of Final Fantasy XV. We have been told before that the game would have a linear structure and that within that, we would see wide open environments and lots of big areas to explore. This time, Tabata provided a little more insight. First things first, it's important to note that the game unfolds over 15 chapters. Apparently, Famitsu recently got to play Chapter 3, and when asked how far this is into the game, Tabata replied that this is about 15% in, and that the game would span from Chapter 0 to Chapter 15. Famitsu then inquired about how content has been distributed throughout all 15 chapters, wondering if each chapter would maintain the same amount of vast content and openness. Hajime Tabata had this to say about the matter. The entire game structure for Final Fantasy XV consists of both open world and linear parts. The first half keeps going as an open world, but the story in the second half is led by a linear path. That way you won't get bored of an open world as the rest of the game gets tightened up. So we made it in a way that you'll also get to advance through it as you have in conventional Final Fantasy games. If you play through the first half and only the main route of the second half, I believe the estimated playtime sits at around 40 to 50 hours. Alright, now before you freak out, let's break down what he said. So the first half of the game will be that vast, expansive, open world style of gameplay that has been promised over the past decade. This probably means lots of side quests, lots of wandering around, exploring, and many of the things you'd associate with a grand scale RPG. The second half is said to be led by a linear path. Now, as soon as you hear the word linear, your brain might immediately start flashing images of Final Fantasy XIII and its infamous hallways. Folks, it is highly doubtful that this is what Tabata was referring to. What he probably means is that the second half will leave less room for lollygagging as the story ramps up and as the narrative tightens, with more emphasis placed on the main quest. This shouldn't be an unfamiliar concept to you if you've played previous Final Fantasy games. As Tabata said, you won't get bored of an open world as the rest of the game gets tightened up. So we made it in a way that you'll also get to advance through it as you have in conventional Final Fantasy games. Keep in mind that an open world of this magnitude hasn't really been done prior to Final Fantasy XV. If you think about it, most previous Final Fantasy games have had this very linear narrative and structure, giving the illusion of an open world through an overworld map. But despite the overworld, you still couldn't just go anywhere at any time. You had to go from point A to point B to point C in accordance to how the developers intended it. So with Final Fantasy XV, whereas the first half will be more open than you'd expect from a typical Final Fantasy game, the second half will be more along the lines of classic Final Fantasy in terms of structure. Like the structure of those past games, there will likely still be exploration, people to meet, sights to see and behold, but maybe there won't be as many side quests, or you won't be wandering around the wilderness, hunting down monsters, or doing menial tasks as much in the second half. It'll probably be more focused on the main quest and advancing the story to its inevitable conclusion. At the same time, however, if you carefully read Tabata's statement, you may notice that he hints that there is more to the second half than just a main story. Notice how one of the things that he says is only if you follow the main route of the second half. This seems to suggest that the second half will have a main route to pursue alongside other side routes, if you will, sprinkled around that players can explore along the way. So it looks like even in the second half, there's other side things to do. I think what Tabata's proposing makes a lot of sense. As the story begins to ramp up, I think it might be a good idea to narrow the narrative focus. I've often found that one of the biggest problems with games like Elder Scrolls that offers absolute freedom at all times is that the story and narrative gets lost somewhere along the way. In Skyrim, for example, if you want, you can do some random super silly quest right before heading to Sovngarde for your final battle against Alduin. It's cool that you get to have such an incredible degree of freedom, but there's no denying that the pacing and narrative integrity suffers a bit as a result. But with the structure that Tabata's suggesting, it sounds to me as though we'll have the best of both worlds. We'll have ample room to screw around and sort of do whatever we want in the first half of the game, while the narrative maybe isn't such a big focus. And once the story starts ramping up halfway through the game, things become more serious, leaving less room for that kind of lollygagging and screwing around, and more room for developing the main narrative, while still having other side routes to partake in, as Tabata hinted at. That way you won't have a situation in which right before you're about to face off against the final boss, you go and do some chocobo racing and then come back and then battle him. That will kind of disrupt the narrative and the story and the focus of everything. So again, I think this makes a lot of sense. So these are the impressions that I'm getting from Tabata's latest statement, and if I'm right about this, I would be perfectly fine with that as long as the second half of the game isn't reduced to a bunch of hallways, which again I highly doubt is a mistake that they're bound to repeat. And you know what, for me the prospect of blending a free open world structure and then following that up with a classic Final Fantasy structure as the narrative tightens seems quite exciting. But I would love to hear your thoughts and theories about Tabata's recent statement regarding the game's structure in the comments below. Do you like that the second half of the game will be more linear compared to the first, or would you have preferred that the game stay completely open world from beginning to end? Drop a comment below, and to be further updated on Final Fantasy news, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.